Welcome to this video. We're going to do a Q&A today on the divine will. It's been a long time since we've done one. It's been almost a whole year. And in honor of doing so, I'm wearing my Carmelite shirt, which I realize is about 30 years old when I put it on today. Let's get started. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So the first question I have is about unity, and it stems from a video that we did regarding the attributes of God, one of which is being united, or the unity of God and the Blessed Trinity. And we, of course, when we start living in a divine will, we begin to share in the attributes of God, such as unity. So the question is, in today's time of division, how do we achieve unity? That's a really good question. And I think we touched upon it a little bit in the video concerning unity as an attribute of God, but we didn't really delve into it that much. So one thing I would say is that the reason for division is because we're in a state of apostasy in the church, where people have walked away from the faith. And that has caused great division between those attempting to adhere to the faith and those attempting to change it. So if you look at the divine will, and if you have any experience with cenicles in the divine will, especially where you're exposed to many different people living in the divine will, I would say that there's no apostasy in a divine will cenical. So the way to achieve unity is basically by living in the divine will, by spreading the good news of it and promoting cenicles. And promotion of cenicles means not necessarily just being the person who starts them, although those people are vital, but supporting a cenical that's nearby you. Often people struggle in an attempt to start the cenicles and have people become involved with them so that they have a cenical that is long-lasting and has sufficient participation. Now, that being said, I can't deny what I've seen. I have seen some touches of division within the divine will community, and I don't believe that it is done intentionally or is associated with apostasy. However, I see certain cliques, let's say cliques are developing where some people would say that I follow Father So-so, I follow Francis Hogan, I follow Father Iannuzzi, and the same was true when Father Brown was with us as well, or Thomas Fahey. For those living in the English-speaking world, and the same applies also, I think, in the Spanish-speaking world, where we have certain personalities who are favored. And I would say that is, if you're doing that, that is not a good way to approach the divine will. There's nothing wrong with the individuals that I've stated. As a matter of fact, I've listened to all of them, and I've learned from all of them. And that should be the approach. We're one community. We're not multiple communities that follow certain personalities, regardless of how good they are. And I hope no one is doing that with me. I would highly recommend that you follow other people even though you may learn more from one than another, as I've stated, I've learned from all of them. And this approach that I see, this siloing of people in the divine will, is reminiscent of what was stated in the New Testament, where people began to say, I was baptized by Paul, I was baptized by Peter, I was baptized by Matthew. Well, we're all baptized in the Holy Spirit. And the divine will comes from God, from the Holy Trinity. And that is the source of it. And those who are supporting or promoting it and doing a great job at it, like the people that I mentioned, they are people who are not the source of the divine will. They're the people who are, in fact, the instruments of evangelizing the divine will. Now, the interesting thing about unity is, and I mentioned that the source is the Trinity. So often from a vantage point like I have where I do videos in the divine will, I see things that are tremendous coincidences because, as I mentioned, we're sharing the divine will. So we tend to be motivated and inspired in a similar manner. And I see that even with people who are not explicitly living in the divine will or promoting it. And sometimes I see that there's tremendous coincidences between what we're doing. And I'll give you a good example, which just happened. I found an encyclical, and I thought this would be a great piece to read in one of my videos. And I was going to devote a short video, maybe a 5-minute video, to doing so. And this encyclical, I'm not going to get into what it was because I'll identify who was involved with actually doing it. So this encyclical was not very well known, and it hasn't been discussed for a while, for a long time. It's not actively discussed. So as I was looking at it and I read it, and I'm thinking, I'm going to create a video to do it. The very next day, someone creates a video doing just that, which is very surprising. And this sort of thing happens all the time. The other coincidence, I wouldn't say it's a coincidence, it's really a manifestation of this unity that I'm referring to. It's unity in the divine will because we're sharing the divine will, as I said. It's involving the video we did on Francis Hogan. Now, Francis Hogan, I've maybe watched maybe an hour, probably less than 2 hours of her work that she's done. And she does great work. And I love the way she ties the Bible to the divine will because she has that background being a biblical scholar. So I listened to the introduction for the first time maybe about 3 weeks ago, and I was shocked at the correspondence of what she says and what I said in the past in my videos. And it's not because that I'm putting myself on the same plane as Francis Hogan. That's definitely not the case, and I'm only a very small fraction of what she's doing and what she's accomplished. A drop in the bucket, so to speak. But it's because we have the same writer, and that's Jesus speaking to Luisa Piccarreta, and we're also inspired by the same divine will. And where that inspiration lies, and where people are actively and sincerely trying to live in the divine will, this unity is very, very unlikely to happen. And I stated in the past that I've seen cases in the divine will that I've never seen before, where people will accept correction readily, especially severe errors that they may be maintaining, those that may involve a misunderstanding of the divine will that tends to heresy. And they readily accept correction regarding that. Now, does that mean there will not be different opinions on certain matters? I'm not talking about very serious differences that involve heresy, but I'm referring to different opinions, opinions on certain things that aren't clear, how to approach things. Absolutely, there's going to be different opinions and differences on those. This is the apostles. They had differences amongst themselves, but when it came to the faith, it came to the teaching of Christ, they all were one. So this disunity, look at it as it's the rotten fruit of the apostasy and the darkness that we find ourselves in today. And going back to the question, our approach can only be, and I'm not trying to sound cavalier, but the approach to darkness is to turn on the lights. And turning on the lights means to promote the divine will, to establish centrals in the divine will, and to spread the teachings of it. And myself, I have no litmus test for who I will speak to the divine will about. There's no litmus test of orthodoxy. I'll speak to even Protestants. If I'm sincerely welcomed and there's a real interest, I'll speak to other faiths, Jews, Muslims even. Whoever's interested in it, I'll speak about the divine will. And we're kind of backdooring into a second question, which is, again, it has to refer to a video that was done on the Elijah's Cloak channel regarding the divine will being Catholic. And the video basically took the approach that says the divine will is Catholic. What I'm going to say regarding that is that we kind of went over this in detail in the first video of Elijah's Cloak's channel, when we went over the 4 degrees of the divine will. The foundation of living in the divine will is referred to as the good Catholic in that video. Now, if you start off as someone else or a different faith or a different denomination, I would say that you could definitely start off that way, but you're going to end up being Catholic. And it's a short answer, but I think that is accurate. So next question, and this has to do, I get this question a lot, and this has to do with the 4 degrees, and it's a question about the 4th degree. And it goes like this: didn't Adam live in the 4th degree and fall? And very few live in the 4th degree, is that correct? And this has to do with a video that we posted by Father John Brown, where he speaks about getting everyone into the 4th degree. Now, first of all, regarding Adam, living in the 4th degree and falling into sin after being in the 4th degree, this goes to what I just said regarding different opinions. There's different opinions on whether Adam lived in the 4th degree or not. And the reason being is that those who believe that Adam did not live in the 4th degree believe so primarily because Adam was tested. And the thought is that Adam was tested because he did not he was not in the fourth degree, and he needed to be tested before he went into it, just like we would. Now, the difference is when you compare to us, the way we are today, Adam was born with the divine will, and we were born in sin. So we must be tested, we must be formed. Adam was born, and I'm of the opinion he was born in the fourth degree. And the reason why he was tested is because God needed to know whether he could be faithful, even though he already lived in the fourth degree, because he was never tested previously. And Jesus speaks to Luisa quite a bit about testing. And one of the surprising quotes that kind of is burned into my conscience is one from Jesus to Luisa, where he says that if not for the test, we would be slaves. So if you think about it, even though Adam was born with the divine will and lived in the fourth degree, he required that test, because otherwise he would be like a slave. And if you think about it, a true love must have some sort of a test. It must be a test to love. It cannot always be milk and honey. And those who have experienced, say, marriage as a good example, those difficulties make a couple stronger and a love stronger. And so it is with the soul and being tested. Now, the reason why I believe that Adam was born in the fourth degree is because of description of his infused knowledge. And it's in the Bible. And you don't go into the second degree with all of this infused knowledge that was described as what Adam possessed. Now, if I'm wrong about this, I'll gladly accept it. And in the divine will, we must always be open to growth. And sometimes growing is learning something that you didn't know before, or in some cases, coming to a conclusion that you're wrong in certain cases and accepting the truth when it's provided. So the question also has to do with, if you're in the fourth degree, will you sin and fall out of it, just like Adam did? And there's a twofold answer to this. One is that because we have the free human will, it's always possible for us to sin. We can always choose sin, even in the fourth degree. Now, it's extremely unlikely to do so because God knows the soul. He knows what preparation the soul needs before it enters into the fourth degree. And you could say, well, why didn't that happen with Adam? Because Adam was not formed like we are formed via testing and trials. It's not exactly the same. So the other portion of the question is, isn't it true that there's few living in the fourth degree? And yes, Jesus says to Luisa that few will live in the fourth degree because it will be difficult for them to give up items that they're attached to with their human will. And I think I mentioned this before. I was kind of disappointed when I heard that. I was hoping that maybe all of us could live in the fourth degree at some point. But apparently it would just be few. So part of the question, I think, kind of assumes that if very few can live there, perhaps it is an achievement that is out of reach. And we should never take that approach. It would be like a student saying that it's very difficult to get straight A's. Very few people get straight A's, so why should I try doing that? And in the spiritual life, especially, that's a terrible approach because we're judged on our intent and not on our results. So we want to be in a position before God where we say we tried. Even if we couldn't make it, we tried our best to live in the fourth degree. And we just didn't say that, well, although the fourth degree could be available to me, it's very difficult and I didn't think I could get there, so I didn't try. You want to be one that said, I tried, and the merit will be provided to you for trying and not for actually achieving. So it's the intent that we are judged by, not our results. And you could take the same example with the student. There may be a student who may not be as gifted as others and may try real hard to get those straight A's. And another student may have the gifts to get straight A's but doesn't try. So as a parent, you would be more pleased with that person or that student that tried but did not get the straight A's than the one that perhaps could have gotten straight A's but didn't try. And the same is true in the spiritual life with our souls. God will be more pleased with a soul that tries to do what's right. The next question is a very interesting one. It has to do with redoing acts. I never did a video on redoing acts because Father Yanusi did a fantastic video on that. And I thought that he covered everything, but then I received this question, and it's something that perhaps escaped him, and because I looked at his video and he did not address it. So the question goes something like this. Does redoing an act in the divine will change the original act? And I have a couple readings. I'm going to try to be light on the readings because I want to cover more questions. But the first reading is a description of what Jesus has done when he has redone the acts. And this comes from Volume 4, August 2nd, 1902. Blessed Jesus redid all in general and for each one individually, everything that each one is obliged to do toward God in such a way that he adored God for each one in particular. He thanked, repaired, glorified for each one. He praised, suffered, prayed for each one. And I comprehended that everything that each one must do has already been done before in the heart of Jesus. And then this is where the question arises from Volume 28, March 12th, 1930. If I can gather everything that they have done and enclosed everything in the divine will they not change into acts of the divine will? And this is a question from Luisa. And Jesus responds, my daughter, in all the acts of creatures, each of them possesses its seed according to how it has been done. If it has not been done in my divine fiat, it does not possess its seed. Therefore, it can never be an act of my will. Now, this could be interpreted a couple of ways. And one is that it's a reference to the act, the original act that's not undone. That's not redone by someone living in the divine will. But I don't believe that's what it says. So the interpretation that I have for that is that the original act itself, even though you were doing it in a divine will, the original act does not become divine, but stays as it is. And I think I provided an example before where it was a take on the parable of the vineyard, where, and it wasn't exactly the parable in the vineyard, it was kind of a spin-off from it, where a worker is supposed to provide a full bushel, but only provides half a bushel at the end of the day. And other workers, seeing the displeasure of the master and believing that that displeasure will extend to all the workers, they gather an additional bushel. So that additional bushel is the act that was redone. But the half bushel, the original act, was incomplete, not done in the divine will. That original bushel remains, and so does the act. And there's a couple implications. One is that we can continuously redo the same act. So if it was the case that all the acts were redone by Jesus, we would not be able to redo any acts. In other words, if the original acts were redone and they're now in the divine will, we would not be able to redo any of them. We could only repeat them. So that's one implication. The other implication is that if you redid the acts of an individual, say this individual in their particular judgment, they've already been judged that they were not going to go to heaven. And maybe, let's take an example where they went to hell. So, and you redid all their acts of their life. Where would be the justice if all their acts were done divinely and they would be in hell? No. Redoing the acts does not change the particular judgment. Particular judgment remains. And it remains because the original act remains as well. And this gives us the ability to redo the same act over and over and over again. And think of the example with the master in the vineyard, where instead of receiving that half a bushel, he'll continuously receive bushels that have been redone for that poor worker, and he'll receive many full bushels because of that. I have another one that I receive. It's a question that I received often. It has to do with living in the divine will as a layperson. And do not be concerned. Most people who live in the divine will are lay people, because there's more lay people than religious. So that's not an obstacle. The divine will is made for you as well as for religious. It has to do with, I think, confusing the fact that if you live in a divine will, that you must say many prayers and pray all day to advance in a divine will. But that's not the case. It's not a matter of vocal prayer continuously said all day that would distract you from your duties. So look at it this way. We're responsible to do, and also we're pleasing to God to do our vocation. And our vocation is a layperson's vocation as well as religious. They're all vocations. So whether you're a husband, or you're a parent, you're a sister, you're a brother, you're a friend, or you're a priest, or you're a bishop, they're all vocations. And the vocations are God's will for you. Even if you find yourself in circumstances that are difficult. In these days of apostasy, we have everyone has family members who are away from the church. We may have family members who are ill. We may have family members who provide us difficulty in the sense that they take up a lot of time. All of that work, or all of those interactions that I'm referring to, are opportunities to live in the divine will. So as you perform those duties and you have those relationships, all are done in the divine will if you're living in the divine will. It has to go with St. Teresa of Avila, a Carmelite doctor of the church. She has a saying, a very famous saying, says, you can find God in the pots and the pans. So what that means in a practical manner is, as you go through life and you perform duties within your life or any actions, if you have the intent of doing it in God's will, you're living in God's will. And St. Therese also had another saying that if you pick up a pin for the love of God, then you've invested that one simple act with a great value, because you've invested it in a manner that is pleasing to God, and you're making it a prayer. And remember, in the divine will, prayers are all acts. And there's a certain merging of prayers and the will and acts in the divine will. All your prayers are acts, all your acts are prayers. And the movement of your will itself, your intention, is also a prayer and an act. So living in a divine will in a vocation as a layperson, as a sister or brother, a mother, a son, it does not prevent you at all from living in the divine will. As a matter of fact, those are opportunities to live in the divine will. And one other question, actually I have a few questions, I'm not sure I'm going to get to all of them. One is about the conversion of England, and this is from Luisa's volume 12, October 16th, 1918. It's a reference to a video where we discussed it. And there's other predictions by other people about the conversion of England. And someone mentioned to me about a saint that also had a prediction I was unaware of, and that was St. Dominic Savio. It was also predicted by St. John Vianney, and also via locution to Father Gobi. And Our Lady of La Salette predicted it also in a very powerful manner. And the question was that it seems unlikely, it seems incredible that England would become Catholic. And it is incredible, and it seems unlikely maybe to us, but anything can happen if it's God's will. So what's unlikely to us can be easily done by God. Let's think of some unlikely characters in the past that God has converted into saints. One would be St. Paul. He was a persecutor of Christians. It's right there in the Bible how powerful the conversion was for St. Paul. And if you could take someone who's persecuting Christians, and as Jesus said to St. Paul, why do you persecute me, actually persecuting Jesus, and make him a saint and a great apostle, then he can do anything with any soul. Another example is Bruno Cornicciola. And he was the seer of Tre Fontane, who had a wonderful message from our mother in 1947 and continued to receive locutions up until his death. He was converted on the spot, and he was a hater of Catholicism, and not just someone who disliked Catholicism, but he spoke out against Catholicism. Also, he had a plan, to believe it or not, to kill the Pope. and he was converted on the spot into a very holy man. So another question that I have is, and this is a good question, and it comes up often, and I think Father Iannucci, he's already addressed this somewhat, but it has to do, there's actually a twofold question. One is about the divine will and public revelation. And the divine will is not new revelation, it's private revelation. It expounds upon what's been revealed to us by the apostles. And it also clarifies certain things that are said by the apostles and taught by the fathers of the church. So it's a clarification in some things that were taught, and also some tradition. The other aspect of it is, and it's almost the flip side of it, is regarding the need to follow certain commandments and to do certain things if you live in the divine will. Now, that could be heretical, so you have to be very cautious with that. And I understand, I mean, you're talking about 36 volumes. It's a lot of reading, there's a lot of content, it covers a lot of ground. It's very easy to misunderstand something. The divine will does not change anything that has come to us in the past. In other words, it does not change our need to live the commandments, does not change the need to participate in the sacraments or to go to church or to be a good Catholic. As a matter of fact, all of those things are the foundation for living in the divine will well. Those are things you must do to live in the divine will well. And I'm going to quote Father Elijah from the Benedictine monks of the divine will. The divine will is Catholic. And as I said, if you start off as someone who's not Catholic, and I know someone who did this, you will soon become Catholic if you try to enter the divine will. You'll find that, like I said, it expounds upon the teachings that have been handed down to us. And you cannot really embrace these teachings of the divine will without also embracing the traditions and the teachings of the church. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, God bless.